So, if you don't know, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is my favorite book of all time. It is a book which has long captivated my mind, a book which I truly do regard as being pretty much just the pinnacle of world literature, a book which just captures so much of the human experience within its pages, and a book whose relevance only seems to increase as time goes on. So, given that, I was quite excited when I heard that the director Guillermo Del Toro would be adapting Frankenstein to yet another film. I was excited because, if I'm not mistaken, this was something of a passion project for Del Toro. I believe he has said in the past that Mary Shelley's novel means quite a bit to him in his own right. And so, given that he seemingly cherishes Mary Shelley's Frankenstein as much as I do, I was enthused to see what he would make of it. And so now that we have Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein on Netflix for all the world to see, I thought I would do something of a review of it, but not just a review of the film as a film, but also a review of the film as an adaptation of the original novel. So that's what I plan to do here today, to say what I thought of the film and whether I thought the film lived up to its source material. So, up front, right out the gate, I would like to say that I liked this movie quite a bit. It is, I would say, a pretty good flick. However, I think it falls a little short of greatness, but I will try to explain why that is. So, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein is an adaptation of the book, which actually does strive to adhere somewhat closely to the arc of the original novel, because most of the adaptations of Frankenstein do not. Uh, to the best of my knowledge, there have only been two adaptations of the book that have actually striven to, uh, tell the actual story of the book. One would be the 1990s adaptation, directed by and starring Kenneth Branagh and written by Frank Darabont, actually. Um, and the other would be I think it's the 2004 two-part television movie miniseries thing, which I think was actually a Hallmark feature of all things, with Donald Sutherland in it. Those are, to my mind, the only two adaptations of the book that have actually tried to be adaptation, like literal adaptations of the book. But Guillermo del Toro's adaptation does strive to more or less tell the story that the book tells, although a lot has still been changed. But in keeping with the book, the movie opens with a ship in the Arctic Circle stranded in the ice. The crew find a near-death Victor Frankenstein being chased by some kind of freakish monster thing. They take him back to the ship, and he proceeds to relate to the captain how he was the son of a renowned European surgeon who grew up in like a palatial estate. His mother died in childbirth, giving birth to his younger brother William. He set out to conquer death, and so became a scientist. And he eventually partnered with a wealthy and syphilitic munitions manufacturer, and eventually, by cobbling together corpse parts and through some unholy scientific process, he managed to create the monster which is now bedeviling him and the crew of the ship. And then the monster shows up and proceeds to relate his part of the story, and how Frankenstein attempted to destroy his own creation when it did not live up to his standards. But the monster escaped, wandered off into the woods, eventually learned speech and kind of the nature of humanity by observing this little family in this cottage. And then set out to have his maker make him a mate so he would not be so alone. But Frankenstein is like, oh, hell no, I'm not making that same mistake twice. So then some people die. There's lots of carnage. There's quite a bit of carnage in this movie. And then Frankenstein and his bastardized creation end up mortal foes, and they chase each other and hound each other, and then that brings us to where the film opens in the Arctic Circle. Spoiler alert, leave now or forever hold your peace. Frankenstein dies, and the monster ultimately makes peace with his own existence. And that is Guillermo Del Toro's Frankenstein in a nutshell. So now, first off, let's talk about just like the actual like filmmaking aspects of this movie, because this is a pretty well done movie on a technical level. First off, the performances are roundly good. Oscar Isaacs plays Victor Frankenstein. I think he does a pretty good job. It's not going to beat out the guy that played Frankenstein in the original James Whale movie, the Over the Top. It's alive. It's not gonna outshine that performance, but he turned in a good performance. He did not go for the over the top mad scientist vibes. His version of Frankenstein is kind of more of a narcissistic dick. Not so much, not this grandiose mwahaha mad scientist persona, but it works. He turned in a good performance. Then you've also got Mia Goth in there as Elizabeth, and she turned in a good performance. And also Christoph Waltz plays the munitions manufacturer who wants Frankenstein to like put his brain in the new body. But he's like, nah, bro, you got like syphilis. I ain't wasting this body that I painstakingly created to put your rotten old brain in there. He plays that guy. He turns in a good performance, but the real like standout performance in this is the guy, whoever it is, who plays the monster. He really did a good job playing the monster. It was able to capture both the pathos and the rage in equal measure, and did a bang-up job doing it. So aroundly, the performances in this film are good. Now, aesthetically, this film is in large measure like a pretty striking film visually, although there were some CGI issues that I had with it a little bit. So this is a Netflix film, and being as it is a Netflix film, I pretty much assumed that we were not going to get any like practical effects or like actual physical sets, that it was just going to be mostly CGI, because that seems to be the way that Netflix likes to get down. And such was the case, and it mostly works, but some things do look a little fake. Some of the backgrounds and the outdoor scenes, you can kind of tell it's not always real. As well, there are some like fire effects which aren't that impressive looking. But thankfully the creature was done with prosthetics and makeup and not CGI. So there's that. But the interior shots in this movie are where this movie really shines aesthetically, because Guillermo Del Toro has a really good eye for style, and the parts of this movie that take place indoors in these like just like palatial estates, these like grand houses and stuff, it's really pretty to look at. There's lots of like drapery and brocade and everything everywhere. It really does a great job of showing off like mid-century European opulence. It's really dazzling in some of these interior shots. The sets are like really rich visually. So overall, it's a really pretty film to look at. But I don't think the script was always the strongest. Now, Del Toro, as I said, did change some things from the original novel, and I'll get to that. But just on the screenwriting level, there are some weaknesses, and that mainly has to do with the dialogue, some of which is downright painful. Well, for one thing, he actually changed it up to where we have a love quadrangle between Elizabeth, Frankenstein's brother, Frankenstein himself, and the monster, where there's kind of a thing going on between Elizabeth and the monster, which actually was a really good idea. I think that actually worked pretty well, and it kind of thematically enriched things. Uh, I think so. That's a change that actually is was not a bad idea, really. But it's kind of like watching this movie. I was kind of reminded of like watching the prequel Star Wars movies, and how George Lucas's writing, especially when it came to like romantic dialogue, was like atrocious. You kind of get that vibe in some scenes of this movie. Uh, it feels like Del Toro was kind of trying to emulate the 19th century romantic prose that the novel Frankenstein is written in, and not succeeding very well at it. In particular, uh, when there's a death scene, the death of Elizabeth in this movie, where the monster kind of absconds with her as she's dying. She says some things which was just kind of like, it's just painfully corny, some of the lines that she delivers. And also, there's some of this is just a little bit on the nose. Like, so the monster kills Frankenstein's brother. And in that respect, it's actually true to the book. In fact, this is, I think, the only uh, this may be the only adaptation where it actually has Frankenstein having a brother who gets killed by the monster, as in the book. But so the monster kills Frankenstein's brother, and as his brother is dying, he looks like Frankenstein dead in the eye, and he says, "Victor, you're the monster." And I was like, you hear that, guys? It's almost like the real monster here is Victor Frankenstein himself, not the cobbled together abortion made out of body parts. It's almost like Victor is the real monster. Like, it's just a little bit on the nose at times. And also, Christoph Waltz's character mentions something about, "Are you going to be burned by your own fire, Prometheus, before you deliver it to mankind?" An obvious reference to the subtitle of the original book. It's a little bit on the nose at times. But it's nothing like deal breaking, just some kind of eye rolling dialogue here and there. Nothing deal breaking. But now let me talk about like how the book how the film measures up to the book. Because even though Del Toro strove to have some degree of reverence for the source material, I don't think that ultimately it really measures up, and I'll try my best to explain why. So, first of all, um, let's address the fact that this movie opens in the Arctic with the ship, like the book did, but it misses kind of the point of that. So, the novel Frankenstein opens with Captain Walton attempting to reach the North Pole, when he finds Victor on the ice and stuff, and this movie has a similar setup to that, but it doesn't have the same impact because it doesn't really mean anything. So, like, the point of Frankenstein, the book, is that blind ambition is a bad thing, and that we have to think about the things we do, and not just plunge headlong into unholy experiments, and attempt to do things that we probably shouldn't do. And like, it all comes to a head in the book at the very end, whenever Captain Walton's crew are about to mutiny because they want to go home because they don't want to die in the Arctic. And then Frankenstein gives that epic "Be ye men, or be ye more than men" speech, and like rallies the crew to press on in their mission. But then Captain Walton is like, "Nah, we're packing it up. We're going home. I'm not gonna kill all these men out here in the ice." And like, the point is that he learns from Victor's story about the cost of hubris and blind ambition, and not to do that. All that's missing from the ship element of this plot. The Arctic element of this plot really doesn't serve any purpose. Like, I mean, it keeps the setting true to the book, but it doesn't have the same thematic impact because the message is gone. So Del Toro dropped the whole message of what that strand of the plot actually had to say. So we just kind of get these random people in the Arctic. It doesn't really have much impact. So there's that. But let's talk about like the the way that he depicts Victor Frankenstein, and this is, I think, probably the film's largest weakness, is that he depicts Frankenstein as just being this arrogant, narcissistic dick who's not very likable. And that kind of misses the whole point of the book, in my opinion, because the message of Frankenstein is that man is too paltry a creature to attempt to play God. That, like, that we are so fatally flawed as humans that even with the best of intentions, we create tragedy in some cases. And that's kind of missing from the film here, because Victor is just portrayed in a very unlikable manner. And like the way that he treats the monster is like abusive, it's just very hostile, and it makes him be way too like overtly villainous. And that's, again, I think that's missing the point of the book, because in the book, Victor has minimal interaction with the creature when it first comes to life. He just like looks at it and screams and then runs away, because he's appalled at what he's done and how his creation is just this like unholy, grotesque abomination, and that he failed in his endeavor. And so he kind of just like ditches the thing. But it's in that he's not intentionally like he's not intentionally being despicable. It's just human frailty, right? Like the tragedy of Frankenstein is one man blinded by his own ambition but too weak to contend with the consequences of his actions. But this depiction of Victor Frankenstein is just very unlikable, just very upfront, kind of narcissistic dick. And so the whole tragedy of this could have been averted if he had just not been a narcissistic dick. But once again, that kind of just misses the whole message of the book, because the book's point is that humans are there's just no way to avoid the tragedy, because Frankenstein fundamentally is doing something that he has no business doing and can't properly contend with. It's the dangers of playing God, right? So I think Del Toro kind of missed the message of the book here, but he also did do some good things with the story that he changed. As I said, we have the love quadrangle between Elizabeth, William, and Victor Frankenstein, and then the monster. And this is actually not a bad idea, because in portraying Elizabeth as having some kind of quasi-romantic connection with the creature, it emphasizes the role of maternity and femininity, which is palpable in the book. Mary Shelley herself grew up without her mother, because her mother died shortly after she was born. And there's a certain kind of maternal aura to the book, in that Victor does not nurture the creature as like a mother would. And also the way that nature is portrayed in Frankenstein. Whenever nature is referred to, it's referred to as in a feminine form, like she, Mother Nature, her. And so what Victor is doing is kind of depicted as like a form of rape in the book, is raping nature. But Del Toro manages to capture a little of that by having Elizabeth be like the only one who's like kind and nurturing to the monster in his infancy. And that was a really good touch. And then ultimately she dies, and then there's that kind of cringy dialogue that she delivers. But you do get something emotionally effective out of that dynamic. And so that was a good choice. And also, in keeping the story of the monster's maturation largely from the book, that did he did get some good miles out of that, having the monster observe this little family in this cottage, and then kind of have this connection with the blind old man. And there's a really actually emotionally poignant moment in the movie where the old man is dying after being mauled by wolves. The old man is dying, and then the monster tells him the monster goes back to where he was created, and he figures out that he's just this unholy abortion. then he tells the old man that, and the old man says, "I know who you are. You're a good man, and you are my friend." Like that actually, that hits pretty hard. That was actually a really good scene. So Del Toro got some of the thematic heart of the book, but he didn't get all of it, and he kind of botched some aspects of it. But he also made the change of having the monster be like indestructible. And that was an interesting change because the book Frankenstein ends with the monster intending to kill himself and just erase himself out of existence. In this adaptation, that's not feasible because the monster is practically unkillable. So he's like stuck with life that he doesn't want, this kind of hellish existence. And I don't know that I would have made that change, but it does have the effect of kind of heightening the horrors of existence, which is kind of the core aspect of Frankenstein. So I can go either way with that. But he also made the change of having Frankenstein have this like vision of this like angel thing, which was so retarded and unnecessary, and just felt like this half-baked motif that didn't really serve any purpose. It was stupid. Again, it's just this recurring motif of this like angel thing in the dreams of Frankenstein. It was retarded. It was so needless, and I don't know why it was in there. That was stupid. But overall, Del Toro's Frankenstein is a pretty good film, and it does admittedly strive to capture, the heart of the novel, and I think it gets a lot of it, but it doesn't get all of it. And so, would I say that Del Toro's Frankenstein is going to be like the be-all, end-all adaptation of this story? No, I would say that. Well, the Brana adaptation, I think, was undercut by some poor choices in casting, like having Robert De Niro be the monster. I don't think that was quite a good choice of casting, and also having Brana himself play the lead role. I don't know. That movie was an ambitious attempt at trying to actually portray the story of the novel, but I guess I would have to fall back on like the Hallmark. I think it's the Hallmark version from the early 2000s, the television movie or miniseries. That's probably still the definitive adaptation as regards like faithfulness. But I do think that Del Toro's adaptation is like a really like good movie. It's a good solid movie that's well made technically, but doesn't quite capture all of what the book was dealing with and trying to get across. But A for effort, I guess. If I had to grade Del Toro's Frankenstein, I would probably give it a B minus. I think it may be a little overlong. It's over 2.5 hours. I think it's a little overlong. I think, and the way that some of the characters, namely Victor, are depicted, kind of misses the point that the book was trying to make. I think some of the dialogue is corny. And again, some of the visual aspects, such as the CGI at some points, and also the angel motif, which is just super stupid, and also the gore in this. Like I mean, I should have anticipated this being a Del Toro film that it was going to have some gore in it, but like some of this, I just don't really think was necessary. I don't think it was necessary. The novel Frankenstein is not a violent book. Like people do get killed, but it's not like this just gore fest. But this had some really gnarly gore in it. Like there were a couple of scenes I was like, damn, that was brutal. But I think that was kind of unnecessary. But overall, it is a good, solid adaptation, which does attempt to revere and capture the magic of the book, and does so in large part, but not in total. I guess the world will never get to see my adaptation of Frankenstein because I do not have the funds to make it. But up here in this old noodle, I do have locked away my own ideal adaptation of Frankenstein, which would have been a perfect fusion of Mary Shelley's original book and the James Whale type Frankenstein with hunched back lab assistants and, you know, diabolical laughter. Like, again, the world will forever be impoverished that it doesn't get to see my adaptation of Frankenstein, which again, if I had the funds, you bet I could make the definitive adaptation of Frankenstein, because I have it locked away right up in here. But in lieu of my adaptation of it, I think that Del Toro's Frankenstein is a noble effort which mostly hits the mark but not quite a bullseye. So anyway, Guillermo Del Toro's Frankenstein, have you seen it? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought of the movie, whether you think it measures up against the book, if you like the book as much as I do. If you haven't read Frankenstein, you ought to, because it's, again, in my opinion, the supreme achievement of all human literature. And if you haven't seen this film, you ought to give it a watch, because it's a good film in its own right. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.